Imagine a young girl ripped from her family, her childhood replaced by chains, silence, and fear. In ancient Greece, countless young females lived as slaves, hidden beneath the glory of temples and philosophers. Their lives were not of beauty or knowledge, but of punishment, abuse, and survival. This is their story, raw and often untold. How girls became slaves. The road into slavery for young girls in ancient Greece was often brutal and sudden. Many were taken during wars, dragged from burned villages as spoils of victory. Others were captured by pirates who raided coastal towns, selling terrified children into wealthy households or the bustling slave markets of Athens. Some girls were born into slavery, their mothers already chained to servitude, making freedom impossible from the very start. Parents in desperate poverty sometimes abandoned daughters, leaving them exposed to die or be picked up by slave traders. Foreign girls were especially targeted, seen as outsiders with no protection. A slave market was a place of misery, where young girls were inspected like livestock, their bodies judged before purchase. Every path into slavery carried with it fear, loss, and uncertainty. What awaited these children was not just hard work, but a life where every choice belonged to someone else's. Legal status and property. In ancient Greece, the law did not see a slave girl as a person. She was property, no different than cattle or tools. An owner could sell her, trade her, punish her, or even kill her without consequence. She could not marry legally, could not testify in court, and could not inherit or own land. Her voice held no weight in society. If accused of wrongdoing, she could not defend herself. Instead, she might be tortured to force a confession, since Greeks believed slaves only spoke the truth under pain. For young female slaves, this legal invisibility meant they had no shield from cruelty. They lived in a world where their humanity was erased by law itself. Daily labor and duties. The life of a young female slave was defined by endless labor. In wealthy households, she might spend her days weaving cloth, grinding grain, cleaning floors, and carrying water from distant wells. She often cared for her master's children, feeding them, rocking them to sleep, and teaching them their first words, even while being denied the chance to raise her own. Some girls became attendants to wealthy women, helping with hair, clothes, and perfumes, yet always reminded of their lower place. Others worked in fields under the scorching sun, bent over crops with no rest. The most unlucky were forced into mines or workshops, their hands bleeding from stone and metal. Even in the home, there was no comfort. Mistakes, whether real or imagined, could bring harsh punishment. Work was never-ending, and freedom was never promised. Each morning began the same way, a life of service where every task reminded them that they belonged to someone else. Harshness, punishments, and abuse. For young female slaves in ancient Greece, discipline was constant and often brutal. A wrong word, spilled water, or moment of hesitation could bring swift beatings. Whips, sticks, and even branding irons were tools of control. Some girls were chained at night to prevent escape, their ankles scarred by iron. But punishments were not the only fear. Many young female slaves were subject to sexual abuse. Masters could use them as concubines, and they had no power to refuse. Some were forced into prostitution, their youth and vulnerability sold for profit. Others lived in constant dread of unwanted attention, knowing silence was their only defense. Beyond the physical, there was a deep psychological wound. These girls carried the weight of humiliation, isolation, and the terror of being treated as less than human. Their lives were shaped by fear, and their bodies bore the marks of both labor and abuse. For them, survival meant obedience, even when obedience cost them their dignity and hope. Family, identity, and social lives. Family life for young female slaves was fragile, often torn apart before it could begin. They could not legally marry, and their children were automatically enslaved, belonging not to them, but to their master. Some were separated from their children at birth, the infants sold or given away without mercy. A slave girl's identity was also erased. She might be given a new name, stripping away the last tie to her homeland. In households, she lived in the shadow of her mistress, sometimes trusted with secrets, sometimes treated with scorn. Yet even in these dark conditions, small bonds formed. Slaves leaned on one another for comfort, sharing whispers of their past or dreams of freedom. These connections were fragile but vital, offering the only sense of belonging in a world that denied them everything else. Manumission and its limits. Freedom was a faint hope, and for most young female slaves, it remained out of reach. Some owners granted manumission, allowing a slave to buy or earn freedom, often after years of loyal service. At places like Delphi, records show freed slaves dedicating their liberty to the gods. But freedom came with limits. Many were bound by conditions, forced to keep serving their former masters under strict terms. Even as freed women, they carried the weight of stigma. For most, freedom was a fragile gift, never full escape. Case studies and cities. The treatment of young female slaves varied across Greece, yet cruelty was never far. In Athens, many served as household attendants, but some were sent to the Laurion silver mines, where darkness, suffocation, and collapse claimed countless lives. Their labor fueled the city's wealth, yet their own lives were disposable. On Crete, the Gorton Code recorded laws about slaves, confirming their children automatically belonged to the master and that sexual abuse by owners carried no real punishment. In Sparta, helots, though technically not chattel slaves, endured brutal control and constant fear, forced to serve Spartan households and often subjected to violent rituals meant to remind them of their subjugation. These examples show that across Greek city-states, slavery was entrenched in society. For young girls caught in this system, the location mattered little. Whether in mines, fields, or noble houses, the weight of bondage remained the same. Conclusion: behind the beauty of temples and the wisdom of philosophers lay the silenced voices of countless young female slaves. Their lives were marked by fear, labor, and pain, yet their endurance is a testament to survival against impossible odds. To remember them is to confront the darkest truths of history.